Hello, everybody. My name is Johnny Lee Chapman III. I am the public artist chosen to work on the New Bern Avenue Bus Route Transit Concrete Artwork Integration Project. And today I'm excited to bring to you some designs for the proposal I call Sidewalk Stories. A little bit about the concept. It started with extensive research into the history and culture of Raleigh. I collaborated with local historians, City of Raleigh Museum archives, and community engagement sessions. The data was then collected and transformed into segments of poetry and prose that will be integrated into the concrete. Station layouts were created to showcase the potential placement of artworks. And we'll start with the station layouts, because this is where we began. Before we could say what does the art look like, we had to figure out where was it going to be placed so that it did not interfere with the functionality of a normal bus station, especially since we're dealing with concrete. So we worked with the NCDO team as well as the additional teams working on this project to create something that is a good baseline for where we think the art will work best at each individual station. As you can see, we've got things color-coded, so we can determine that we'll put mosaics here, we'll have stamps here, and we'll have plaques here. And each station received one of these layouts that was chosen and created. I had a chance to choose exactly where the artwork would go, making sure that did not interfere, again, with things that are important to the station's function. But once we figured that out, it was time to determine what the art looked like. And the first piece of art that I want to bring to you is called concrete poetry. This right here is an example of one of the pieces that we're going to include in the overall station artwork designs. And as you can see, I'll talk a little bit about the details, but as you can see, there is an imagery that is associated with the words as opposed to it just being something that is written line by line. And this is actually a literary form called concrete poetry. And what that is it's taking a subject matter, and instead of it just writing about the subject, it allows the actual text and the format of the text to form that subject as well. So a little bit more details. The artwork will be created by stamping a prefabricated stencil design into the cement. I've been working with the graphic artist to create that design, the same one that you saw before. Unique poems have been crafted using the city's history as the main source for subject matter. So in that previous one, I don't know if you had a chance to read it all, but it is a vigil candle to represent the city cemetery. There's going to be a 4-foot by 6-foot dimension. So this is going to be the largest, not the largest, it will be the largest artwork piece that we'll put into it, but it will not be the longest. And we're going to have 12 of these poems, and they're going to serve as kind of like the central artwork for some of the stations that they've been chosen to work at. So we've got them at platforms that are opposing each other as well. So as you can see, we've got them at the inbound and outbound stations. And the best thing is that you don't have to cross the street to the other platform to read the poem in its entirety. It is, each station platform has its own individual poem. And here's an example of what it would look like when it's finally installed into the ground. Next up, we've got mosaics. And I'll let y'all take a look at this for a quick second. I'm really excited about this design because I think it brings a level of color to the concrete that the other art pieces do not highlight. So some details. This artwork will be fabricated in a mosaic studio by a local mosaic artist. The designs have also been worked on by a local graphic artist as well. So they're going to be colorful and vibrant, like I mentioned, and they're drawing inspiration from lesser known details regarding Raleigh's history, but also Raleigh's culture. So in the previous example, we saw the words Bloomsbury to beyond. Well, Bloomsbury was the original name of the settlement that has become Raleigh. And Raleigh is a phrase recited often as such in Southeast Raleigh, where I have a strong connection to. They're going to be 3-foot by 4-foot dimensions, a little bit smaller than the concrete poetry, but that's also because these are, again, they're vibrant, they're aesthetically pleasing, they're visually engaging. So I didn't want them to be too large, and also the cost of them would not merit the use of them if we made them too large. For that reason, we're going to choose 7 mosaics and we're going to place them at stations. Most stations will have 2 of them, and there will be one that is allowing that one that will have only just 1. Here's an example of what it kind of looks like for a mosaic to be incorporated into the ground. As you'll see, it'll go directly and stay uniform with the concrete, so there won't be a ledge or a rift or a dip in it, which is again, very important for functionality of sidewalks. Next on the list, we've got plaques. And this was the most requested art by the community. When I attended an earlier community engagement session, I can specifically remember some people saying, like, where are plaques for our prominent people in the city and in the state? So these details, we're going to have bronze plaques that are going to be fabricated and installed into the concrete. We're working with a local fabrication company to bring that to life. And I've also worked with a local graphic artist, again, to create the designs that will be fabricated. Like I mentioned, the plaques are going to highlight and honor the lives of African Americans who excelled in various professions. And I use the word profession because that is the determining factor for the 10 individuals that we chose. I chose things from the librarian, like you saw with Molly Huston Lee, to politicians, to Raleigh's only Black mayor, to dressmakers, fields that represent both Raleigh, but also individuals in those particular fields whose journeys and stories really impacted not only our history, but also the culture of our city and state. We're going to have a 3 foot by 3 foot dimension. So this will be the smallest artwork, but it will still remain in a place, in a position where it can be appreciated and revered. And for that reason, we're going to have 10 of these designs. We're going to have them they're not going to be directly placed in areas where there's a lot of foot traffic, because we didn't want to create these honorific pieces of art and then just have people step all over them. We wanted to put them in positions that are a little bit less traversed, so that, again, we don't have an issue where people are stepping on the history of these important individuals. Our plaques will not look exactly like this, but this is just an example of what plaques integrated into the concrete resembles. And I think the bronze will be a nice touch to the gray concrete. Next on the list, we've got concrete stamps. Now, this is going to be very similar to concrete poetry in terms of its in terms of the fabrication, the installation, but where they differ primarily is the content of each of these art pieces. As you can tell already, they look different despite them both being stamps. So again, this is going to be a prefabricated stencil stamped into the ground. The subject matter in these stamps will address all aspects of Raleigh's history, talking about landmarks, location, interesting dates in time, or interesting individuals whose lives made a difference for Raleigh. So they're going to be presented as prose and blurbs about the specific area. So less on the poetic side, but more informative and educational. And even still, I took some liberties when it came to actually writing out it to make it feel less like a textbook and more like a caption for the street that you're standing on, essentially. We're going to do a 3 foot by 4 foot dimension, a little bit larger than the plaque, about the same size as the mosaic. Again, just trying to make sure that they hone in and they're not too large. And lastly, we're going to have 35 stamps. Another reason why we didn't want to make them too large. This is going to be the bulk of the art around the stations, and every station is going to have at least one. There will be some stations that have more, but we wanted all stations to have this, again, this idea of a caption located at it. And here's an example of what that will look like when it's in the ground. Not one of ours particularly, but just a reference point for what stamps in the ground look. And lastly, we've got banners. And this is still one of the earlier designs for it. But what essentially we're thinking for the banner is to have the artwork either sandblasted or, again, stenciled into the concrete. We're looking at I'm going to jump down right quick, but we're looking at a 3 foot by 30 foot dimension. The reason for that is I want these words to stretch across the sidewalk in itself. As you saw, it's just few words that are being put into it. So for that to be spaced out across, I think is really unique, because the text itself is supposed to be a motivational kind of banner, something similar to when you see athletes go into before they leave the locker room, or dancers or somebody else, they have a banner. I essentially wanted this banner to be something similar to individuals who are traversing it. So depending on which way you're going, you get that motivational quote. You get another one going in the opposite direction. The really unique thing is that all the text from those banners is part of an original poem that's going to be stamped into the Go Raleigh station. So people might be able to pick up on and say, oh, wow, that's the line that comes from that poem as they're making their way across the route itself. We chose to put these on multi-use path sidewalk and longer stretches of concrete. Reason being is because we didn't want this, again, 30 feet is a long stretch. We didn't want to put it in places where there was not that much dimensional space. And for that reason, we chose 7 spots to put them at. And they essentially are the 7 stations that are closest to the downtown area. Once you leave the King Charles and go into the Medical Boulevard or the Medical District, you will not see any more banners. But again, we're focusing on putting them on the multi-use path. And that stretches all the way until the Raleigh Boulevard exit or station. And here's just a kind of an example of what it would look like utilizing both lines as well as words to add a sense of wayfinding, in a sense, to feel a little bit more directional when you have a line that's separating the words going one way and being read the other way. So those are the concepts that we have for artwork. A little bit more details. Like I mentioned, we've got uniform dimensions, plaques 3x3, stamp 3x4, concrete poetry 4x6, mosaic 3x4, and then banners, which is not up there for whatever reason, 3 foot by 30 foot. We're using 2 fonts primarily in the application of the text. And the reason being is we wanted to avoid too many lettering differences across the stations. We didn't want to have a different text for the bronze and then a different text for the stamps and then something completely different for the mosaics. The more uniformity that the text is, the more it would feel like one cohesive art project as opposed to a smattering of a bunch of different kind of like designs just plastered everywhere. Again, symmetry was important for me when it was coming to the station designs and creation. I wanted inbound and outbound stations to reflect and mirror each other, and also the station itself trying to limit or trying to make sure that one side of the station is similar to the other. So that's maybe placing 2 stamps on one way and then 2 stamps on the other, or 1 stamp, 1 mosaic on one side, and then the other stamp and the other mosaic on the other half. That goes a little bit more into that intentional placement. The mosaics will be incorporated at platforms that have higher volumes. Plaques are going to be located in places that highlight the professionals, and stamps and poems and banners, or stamps and poems, will also be placed in site-specific areas. I want to give a quick shout out to the artist team, because it was through their efforts that I was able to bring these ideas and these words to life. So just quickly want to read through them. The mosaic design artist was Gabriel Ingetz. The plaque design artist is Keely Hagar. The concrete poetry design artist is Tony Lockhart. The mosaic fabricator is Carlos Gonzalez. The plaque fabricator is Longview Graphics. Stamp fabricator is Fourth Dimension Films, or Signs, excuse me. Historian Carmen Catherine, and community engagement lead Octavia Rainey. And I'd say almost all of these individuals are connected to the Raleigh or the Triangle in some capacity. So in a sense, we are working with an almost all local and community-based team. And for me, I think that was really important when thinking about what kind of community artwork do I want to bring to the city of Raleigh. A note on accessibility. So the City of Raleigh Arts team and I have been in communication with the NCDOT regarding accessibility since the beginning. Again, we started with station layouts and making sure functionality was paramount for this project. Again, this is a sidewalk. This is a bus station. I don't want the artwork to take up such a role that it makes it no longer traversable, in a sense. So with that being said, all the artwork can be traversed on foot and on wheel, even the stamps, everything can be walked or rolled upon. Mosaic glass will be slip resistant to avoid any kind of accidental falls that may happen. And then the colors incorporated into some of the mosaics will not clash with important sign components like the bright yellow station edge platforms, and any other green for walkways or blue for accessibility. We wanted to make sure that those did not cause any miscommunication with individuals. Now, for those with low vision, we've been discussing alternative strategies to include supplemental audio files for all the text and designs. That we're thinking about having a QR code and digital accessibility. So this makes it, again, artwork for everybody in the community of Raleigh, not just those who have the ability to see. And lastly, final thoughts. We have reached this point in the project only after continuously reflecting, confirming, and double-checking with team members to ensure all invested parties were on board. This project has worked in multiple phases. We've tackled and addressed each area before moving forward. And before we do move forward, we make sure, again, that everybody says, yes, we're ready to go. So now we're at a point where we are asking the public to join us in the creation process. We need your input about this artwork because these sidewalk stories illuminate moments in time when Raleigh's community shined. And with the community's engagement, our aim is to integrate thoughtful and creative artwork that addresses the lesser known histories. So again, in closing, I thank all of you for taking the time to watch this video, to learn a little bit more about the artwork. We're going to be attaching files that you can see all the art pieces that will be incorporated. There are, I want to say, 70 designs altogether that will be placed across the 19 stations. So take time, look at it, let us know what you like, what you love, what you dislike, what you wish were changed. Any kind of input at this point is extremely vital for us as we get ready to move into the fabrication component. There's still room for these designs to change and to make sure that they reflect the community of Raleigh as best as the community would like to be represented. So again, thank you all for your time, and I look forward to hearing from all of you soon. Thank you and take care.